everyone. Welcome to the Teach Your Kids podcast. I'm Manisha, a teacher of 20 years, and this podcast is about homeschooling, whole child development, and the future of education. And today we are going to talk about educating students about sustainability and green communities. And I am so excited to be joined today by a longtime mentor, Julian Keniry. Welcome, Julian. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I'm very interested in this podcast and what you're doing. And I first came across it on LinkedIn and just thought it's tremendous.
Well, it's just so wonderful to be connected. I mean, Julian and I met over 20 years ago when I was an undergraduate at Brandeis. And I think you really probably are one of my first mentors because I was very interested in how to help save the world, essentially, very passionate about climate change and sustainability. And I discovered this amazing book Julian had written, Ecodemia, and also at the time, she was the senior director at the National Wildlife Federation, running a program for students to help green their campuses. And I applied and was awarded a fellowship and worked towards getting our purchasing department to use post-consumer waste paper and create a lot of other mischief on campus, calling secretaries at 5 a.m. and advocating them to get paper on campus. This is a funny story. There's actually a phone system at the time where you could leave a message on every single person's answering machine at the same time. So I literally made a call at 5 a.m. and with the head of the office at every single major on campus, telling them to change their paper. So anyway, it was an amazing project and I felt so fortunate to be chosen and I got to meet Julian and you've been a wonderful mentor ever since.
Oh, that is just such a fun story. And I remember you so well. And it seems like only 5 years ago. And part of the reason is that amazing photo. Do you remember taking with
yes, on the tree staff? With the black dress.
And you were so proud just showing up the new post-consumer recycled paper that you were bringing onto the campus. And I think the staff and administrators were feeling similarly enthusiastic that a student would care enough to explore best practices and want to help them make a difference. It's such a great example of what sustainability education means too, that, we think it means going on a rooftop and installing solar or planting a tree, but it has to do with every discipline, every operational area, and a campus is a great forum for exploring those connections and possibilities.
It's so true. And Brandeis is so wonderful in the way it combines campus activism with support from teachers. And at the time, Laura Golden was my professor at Brandeis, and she actually passed away a couple years ago, but she did such an incredible job nurturing the students and helping them understand that change can start locally and really channeling all of our passions and our research into activism on campus. So I recently emailed you and you brought up a great idea. I think that one of the things that has really inspired me about the homeschooling community is that is this kind of skill sharing that happens. So a while ago, I kind of got turned on to Scott Peck's work, The Different Drum, and he talks about the true community, which is sharing resources and is bonded in such a way that they can go through the difficult stages of community to get to a real collaboration where they're helping each other out. And when I look at a lot of the problems with addiction that we see in some of these bigger schools that are united around cliques, and then compare to that to these homeschooling communities that are really united around this shared value of education, it really starts me thinking, well, maybe these communities can create a model for sustainable communities. And so you have done a lot of thought and research about sustainable communities. And I was wondering if maybe you could share a little bit of your thoughts and findings on that topic, what a sustainable community could look like.
That's interesting. So you're talking about Scott Peck and sustainable communities, and that scale as a context for engaging students. And then you mentioned sharing knowledge, and I think it's a wonderful scale. And one of the things that is important for engaging students and young people is pointing out exactly that they have options when it comes to the topic that they focus on for sustainability or the scale. And so looking at that from a slightly different angle, their options on scale could be in the home, in the school, in the neighborhood, in the larger community, in the watershed, in the broader bioregion. Do they want to think about their whole state? Or how about the whole country? Or maybe a region, a continent? And that they have that choice in scale is really important, as well as in topics. So just that flexibility to think about options. And then of those options, the community scale is a great one. It's kind of a complex one to start. You know, when you consider that even a school is quite complex, as you found out at Brandeis, you know, it's the purchasing, it's the landscape, it's the transportation, it's the built environment, it's the energy choices, it's the furnishings, the paint, it's communications and marketing. You know, David Orr talks about crystallized pedagogy. David Orr, an author of many books about environmental education. And crystallized pedagogy is this idea that the buildings, the landscape, how we design, how we operate, reflect what we think is important as a society. So that scale is already quite complex. And then to broaden from there to a town or a city or a neighborhood is a next level. And there's no reason why not. I do think a school, in a way, is a community, and it is a scale that is, it's perfect. And it's a great platform. You know, a home or a school is a great platform for experimenting with where are we starting now? You know, what are our kind of baseline activities or baseline level of performance? What would we like to change and improve? How are we doing over time? And then thinking beyond the home or the school to, okay, how do we extend these lessons learned to the broader community? And like you said, learn together. And I think, thinking, I mean, your podcast is mostly about homeschooling. It's about learning, right? It's about learning on so many different levels in many different contexts. And I think one of the podcasts I listened to was about how there can be hybrid arrangements where students are learning at home, and then sometimes they're going into school, and sometimes they have tutors, and sometimes they're going to specialized interactive programs with other students. So I think those different environments lend themselves really well to reaching out to people at a community level and forming partnerships. And so what you did at Brandeis, it can be extended to the broader community. And just to give an example, here in DC, I was looking into trying to make a map of sustainability, thinking, about examples of jobs. What are the career pathways? What are the skills? What are the jobs? And it seemed like it would be important to start with, who is doing exemplary work? Who is an example? And there were many in Washington, D.C., but the one that surprised me the most was the purchasing department in the Washington, D.C. government. And to my surprise, I didn't know this. I only found it out just by researching and trying to find examples. The department had won a national award from the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. They're always a mouthful, these acronyms. SPLC, Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. And I thought, well, how green can that really be? And looked into it, and nearly every product category the division is responsible for purchasing now has new specifications for those products. And looking at the whole life cycle, from designing the product to manufacturing to retail to storage to packaging to end user, and then reclamation of those different products, whether it's office supplies or paper, etc. And so you say community, that can just be such a fruitful platform for extending lessons in the home, in the family, at school, in different contexts to that broader scale, and doing like you did, where you're reaching out to the different department heads and leaders and saying, hey, can we work together? Can we learn together? How can I help as a volunteer or an intern or eventually a full-time employee if that's of interest?
And I think what is also really extraordinary about the work that you've done on schools and college campuses is that when there were some people, like students, who are really passionate about greening their campuses and used evidence-based approaches and were able to change the way their community ran, that then became a playbook that could be replicated in other communities because the results were there from their work. And I also heard a great example of this recently. Elizabeth Bagley, who's at Project Drawdown, got her local city in Alaska to hire someone who's in charge of adopting climate change changes, essentially. And the city was able to get millions of dollars because they were able to hire this person to implement some of the changes in their local community. So you can really create a template for other communities. I'm curious to know your thoughts on what a sustainable community looks like. And it seems to me, I mean, when I was younger, I was much more interested in, how much energy does it save when you use this light versus this light, and post-consumer waste. And now I really start to feel like there's kind of a way we need to relate to each other that needs to shift in order for us to live more sustainably. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that and how we can start to make those shifts even in a community of 20 people.
It's the most important thing, and it's the hardest lesson to relay and learn. And, we're all learning. My sister teaches art, and one of the themes over the last few years has been socio-emotional intelligence, and even just awareness of our emotions and ability to identify them and accept them, to figure out how to work together effectively. And it's as important as the hard technical skills. We're hearing today some reporting saying that young people want the hard skills. They're saying, stop telling us about emotional intelligence and give us the hard skills. We want to convert these problems, climate change and pollution and habitat loss, to solutions. And we want a well-paying job. So give us the hard skills. So hard skills are important, and sustainability is becoming more sophisticated and is requiring very specific tools that meet certain standards. And that's important for parents and students, young people, to understand. At the same time, those soft skills, almost every employer I've ever worked with has cited that as number one. the ability to listen, to reflect back, to assimilate information, to write thoughtfully and well, to present information, to work collaboratively. I know, it was a study through Google looking at what makes an effective team. You probably read about this. And they researched, and they were surprised because the result wasn't what they thought. It wasn't the members of the team were smarter or faster or sharper or something like that. It was ultimately psychological safety, a sense of belonging in the group, being able to share ideas without being made to feel stupid. Everyone feeling that they had equal airtime, equal real estate for ideas. And that really plays out in sustainability. You mentioned the community scale. I'm always thinking about scales and topics and making sure young people and students realize they have options. They can choose. And psychological safety is so key. And I do think most of us are intimidated when it comes to, maybe you weren't, Manisha, because I could see you press that button for, that information about recycled paper and other options to go out to all the staff with one press, right? But it can be intimidating. And that's a lesson in itself to grow that muscle, to reach out. And then it's so important that when students and parents do reach out, that authorities, decision makers, lawmakers, department leaders respond with kindness and patience. And I'll give an example here. I live in Washington, D.C., but you can take the metro towards the end of the Red Line, very nearby, and go to Rockville, Maryland. And at a certain point, I don't know if they still have this, but I just thought it was brilliant. They have this Community 101. So any member of the community, as I read up on what this was, any citizen or somebody new to Rockville can go to these one-on-one sessions. Of course, before the pandemic, this was in person, so maybe this is offered online as well now, and learn how the town works. Who makes the decisions, when and how? How can you have input? How is your water? How do you receive clean, potable water? Where does it come from? How does it treat it? How does it flow? Where does it go? All the things that we might otherwise take for granted are covered. And I always thought if somebody had a really good idea, they could probably pose that as part of the Community 101, that everybody could be introduced to that, and maybe as you kind of embellish that idea and you dream a little, maybe you're given options. You choose what you learn. You don't have to learn everything in the Community 101. Maybe you can choose your chapters or the point where you want to engage. And I just mention that because, when it comes to psychological safety, isn't that a nice way to invite everyone in?
Absolutely. And when I think about homeschooling, and it's been quite a journey now of 10 years learning about this new movement of homeschoolers that's emerging, it strikes me that, first of all, they have a lot more quality time with their primary caregivers, which fosters a sense of secure attachment. And I had plenty of anxiety in college, but one thing I did get to do is spend a lot of time with my mother as a child because she actually became a teacher at my school. And for me, when I learned about something difficult in the world, my natural response was to say, well, how can I fix this? Instead of just kind of putting on a cloak of apathy, which I think comes from fear. And now that I'm developing as a person, I'm trying to find more of a middle way where I think strategically about how to solve this problem. But even back then, I think that was part of it. And then the other thing about homeschooling communities is just, I think there's a lot more time and space. So I immediately thought, well, what a cool project for a homeschooler to kind of figure out how their city works, do research on it, and explain it to other people in the community as well. And there's just a lot more time to think about these exchanges in that environment. I do want to ask you about the work that you are doing now. And I know you founded Green Teach for Opportunity and the Education for Sustainable Development International group. Could you share about that organization and its mission and the work you're doing with teachers and students?
Of course, I would love to. Well, when I had led higher education programs at National Wildlife Federation for quite some time. And I took about 2 years. I thought I just need to reflect and reorient myself because I had been in that arena for more than 20 years. I thought it's a good time in my life to think about what is my calling? What is my focus? And is it higher education? Is it campus, sustainable campus operations? Or is it something else? And so I took 2 years and reflected, went all around the world, learned to surf kind of. I actually caught one green wave.
Wow.
And went to Long Island turns out there's really good surfing there at the very end of Long Island and Montauk. And tried to learn in Florida, tried to learn in Costa Rica. And through that, it became more and more clear to me that higher education and sustainability are my lifelong passion. There's no shaking that. I just love it. And that there's something missing, and that is more engagement of teachers. Ironically, I mean, you would think, colleges, universities, high schools, when it comes to sustainability, that we would think of teachers as central. But my experience has been that oftentimes teachers are not included. And it's really the students working primarily with the staff. So, we're talking about a homeschooling environment. And the analogy would be engaging the parents and, engaging community organizers and people who are willing to be mentors and supporters and co-learners. And I thought if we could engage teachers, talk about scale in our ability to reach young people. And so same with engaging parents. I mean, it's just this way to reach young people and students that we can't really do by skipping over parents and teachers to go directly to the young people, which a lot of programs do. And, in the workforce arena, for example, when employers want to hire, they will, put up an ad or a job posting or go directly to a community career one-stop, or go to the career office at a school. And what happens is just a subset of students end up learning about those opportunities. And so engaging the parents, engaging the teachers can engage students much more inclusively and sustainably over the longer term. And so when you think about something like job demand and the hundreds and millions of jobs for sustainability that are coming online right now in nearly every field, from high tech to operations to finance, we need talent at a level that is unprecedented. And the old way of posting a few, ads is not going to cultivate that talent. That talent is there and it's ready to be engaged if only young people kind of knew how to connect their passion with these various career avenues, or to start their own business. If they can kind of see the need and a gap in the need or a better way to fill the need. So, I felt like engaging teachers, and that includes parents who are teaching their children, or collaborating as parents to teach children in a neighborhood, that needs to be the focus. And so Green Teach for Opportunity is about focusing on teachers and supporting teachers in that learning process. It's not that we don't include students, it's just that we focus on teachers. So when we say it's teacher-centered, it's so that it can be student-centered with teachers at the center. And teachers deserve a lot of support. Our model, it's a credentialing model, and it's a 4-pillar approach that involves a lot of choice for teachers as they ground to and orient to sustainable development, and then figure out how they want to adapt their syllabus or their course or their way of engaging students or their children. And then thirdly is inspiring other parents, other teachers in various ways that match a parent's or teacher's strengths, which could be, hey, I want to give a TED Talk, or, oh, I think I want to educate other parent teachers and, host a professional development session about what I'm finding, what I'm learning, what really works, what the opportunities are. And then the 4th pillar is advancing. How do we take what we've learned and build on those lessons over time and engage other teachers, over time as well. So it's grounding, adapting, inspiring, advancing, which fittingly is Gaia.
I love that. Wow. I mean, first of all, I just want to reflect what a pioneer you are when it comes to network effects, because before Mark Zuckerberg launched Facebook using a campus by campus approach, you had been running a program that was greening campuses, campus by campus. And now we've seen companies like Remind and Class Dojo who are going school by school, with their messaging apps. But you were really one of the first people out there who thought of this extraordinary concept of building a movement community by community, which I think is just so cool. So when you go into these schools and, talking about all of these jobs that are emerging that requires knowledge about sustainability, what are the key skills that you're trying to get teachers to teach? Especially, I know you also work on college campuses, but especially at the K through 12th grade level, what are the skills that you really feel are important that the children are learning in order to prepare themselves for these green careers?
A lot of work has been done on competencies, which are these bundles of skills, attitudes, affective qualities, emotional qualities. And I think competencies are one important way to think about skills. And they include ideas like future thinking, being aware of the future implications of choices today and making decisions accordingly. So, for example, something might appear to be cheap today, but costly tomorrow. So that ability to, think about future generations and think intergenerationally about the future, it's a competency that involves quite a few different skills. Another is systems thinking. And that's one way to think about that is if we tug in one way, what ripple effect does it have somewhere else? How are systems, components, departments, aspects interrelated? And trying to take a holistic approach, considering multiple aspects of a system. So for example, in a campus setting or a home setting, water, you purchase it, and then you might heat it, and then you might dispose of it. That's a whole system. Where is the water coming from? What do we do with the water? How much are we using? Are we heating it? And where does the water go? And you can even think more broadly. How does the water flow in the watershed? Where is it treated before it comes to my home or my community? How is it treated? What am I doing once it arrives to me? How much of it am I using? How much of it am I heating? What is the energy consumption, energy footprint? What are our options there to be comfortable and have plenty of water, but use it, thoughtfully, carefully? Can we recycle it? Can we gather our water on site, thinking of our home like a tree that gathers the water and recycles it? Can we, think about retaining the water on the site? Do we have to sewer it? Can it be reused on some level? And so that's, one example of thinking in systems, which is a competency that incorporates many skills. So the jury is out on what the most important competencies are. A lot of work has been done on that. And Global Council for Science and the Environment, GCSE, it's been around for a long time, has been focusing with Arizona State University on this topic, looking at dozens of suggestions and narrowing them down to about 6. So future thinking and systems thinking are two really critical competencies that incorporate most of the skills. Now, you said, what is a skill? And there are so many, but it never hurts to be able to do a baseline assessment on any given topic. It's such a good place to start. So say, what is a baseline assessment? It's basically what we're doing or using now. And so, for example, if a child, a student were to think, well, I'm really concerned about waste, and I want to look at that, a baseline assessment would say, well, how much are we generating? Maybe, by volume. What are the metrics? You have to think about that. Is it by volume or by weight? How much are we generating? Does that vary over time? And what are our options? If we sort through that stream, what is the composition of the material? Is some of that organic? Well, if so, how much? In my, where I live, which by the way is a story in itself, it's 300 square feet where I live and I love it. I would say the majority of the material I generate is organic by far, by volume and weight. And I walk it over to the Whole Foods, which is down the street, and put it in the compost bin. And we now have a committee in our building that's focusing on sustainability. We had already installed solar hot water panels for the building, and we have pretty good recycling, but we don't yet take the organics in the building. So I thought, well, I don't think I can physically carry everyone's organic material over to the Whole Foods to compost it. So, that's an opportunity. And it comes from asking the critical question, what is the composition of the materials flow in my unit? And saying, oh, more than 50%, by volume and by weight is organic. So a baseline, ability to assess that baseline introduces many different other skills, like what are the metrics we want to use? What is our scale for assessment? What are our options? What are the best practices? Okay, now how do we negotiate change? What else do we need to change? Do we need a bin on our our kitchen counter to help us with composting. As I think I watched one of your podcasts, one of your guests said that was their favorite strategy. Or, do we implement composting more building wide or neighborhood wide? So the skills, when talking with teachers, we're going through a beta test of our GEM model, which stands for Mastery of Green Skills Education, the GEM course. And one of the first things teachers will ask is, give me a list of skills. I want to know the skills. Well, you can hand the skills over, and in every industry, be it, advanced tech like AI or nanotechnology, there's a whole list of standards and skills now. And that whole industries are shifting. And it's dozens and dozens. But there are a few that are these kind of overarching competencies and skills that are beneficial to have. And one is baseline assessment. Now, I should just go on a little bit with that and say, once people identify strategies, it's really helpful to develop criteria, the ability to come up with criteria. I have not seen that in a list of competencies, but it really is a competency because it involves critical thinking, strategic thinking, systems thinking, future thinking, many different competencies to come up with really good criteria for making decisions, making choices. Because if you do that baseline assessment and come up with, say, 20 options or more, how do you decide which to implement first? What if you have limited budget and limited time? So those criteria can help to identify the projects, prioritize them, rank them, and that's called a portfolio ranking. You're creating a portfolio. Well, you can't really do that without criteria. And sometimes that even involves collaborating with others and coming to consensus. So the baseline, developing criteria to help then rank projects and create a portfolio right there. That's a world of skill that applies whether you're in arts, you're teaching languages, you're in finance, you're in the building trades, you're in infrastructure, in natural resources, the natural environment. It's all right there. Baseline assessment, criteria, rank your project portfolios, collaborate and implement, and then refine what you've learned and sustain the learning from there.
So we have a lot of education entrepreneurs and obviously parents and teachers and small micro school leaders here. I think a lot of people will be thinking, yeah, I would really like to teach children in my class or my own child future thinking and systems thinking and how to develop criteria. So I'm curious to know, on a practical level, what's the best way to take advantage of the resources that you offer? Should people sign up for a workshop, or how does it practically work?
The easiest thing, I have a little team, and we all said what we want is for teachers to be able to come to the website and take action within an hour that would make a difference immediately. And if they never work with us again, it could be all they need. And so we developed this program called the Green Upskill Challenge. And you go to the website, and in 60 minutes and 3 steps, it can transform the perception of what's possible. And the 3 steps are, first, take a look at, we created this list of industry associations that offer suites of sustainability resources. So the industries include the Chemical Association, Chemical Engineering Association, the BRE Building Trades Association. We researched about 100. It took us over 10,000 hours of research to develop that chart. Okay, why would a teacher want to look at a chart of 100 associations? Because it's very hopeful. It's very positive to see what these industry associations are doing. Passionate people in those associations representing dozens of employers form these committees that develop the standards, and you can tell they care. In almost every case, those standards have evolved over time. And even if a teacher were to say to a student, hey, take a look, choose one, and critique it. You don't have to follow it as though it's gospel. You can critique it. What would you do differently? What is a gap in the thinking? What would you recommend to the leaders there? That is a huge shift right there, because immediately it's plugging a student into trends, broader, regional, national, global trends. And that can open up possibilities of, say, scholarships, internships, apprenticeships, mentorships, like resume review. Many of these associations say, hey, we've got a cadre of volunteers. They're happy to take a look at your resume and give you some feedback. And it may even give students an idea of businesses they can start. They look at these industry associations, explore these suites, and think, I have a business idea here. I'm going to join this association. They're going to help promote my business. So that's one of the steps. Another is to watch our little video. We have this 8-minute video. And the point of it is that it is within the control of teachers. Even, parents who are teaching, who have a lot that they're juggling, can still do simple things that will open a world of possibility for students. And the video is meant to show that there's demand for talent and what that demand is, and that it's at many different scales. And though climate change is quite daunting, habitat loss is very daunting, and we don't mean to be sanguine about that or to gloss over it, that there is a counter measure of action. And then the third step is to take a look at this survey and benchmarking tool that we have. We're not at a point yet where we're running the survey. We want to, but we do offer it, because looking at it can give ideas for what are some good questions to ask. What are some benchmarks for teaching at any scale, whether in the home, in a micro school, etc. And what we will do when we launch that, ideally in different countries, is be able to see trends in how teachers are thinking about green skills, demand for talent, opportunities for students, how to convert gloom and doom into roll up our shirt sleeves and make a difference. And so it's called the Green Upskill Challenge. And when teachers take those 3 steps, which they can do in 1 hour, as part of that, as a guide and companion, they receive what's called a GEM starter kit. And it's like a mini version of our course. And it's all online. Now, if you're the kind of person who wants to spend hours with something, you could, but you could also just scan it, get a really good sense of what's in there and how you want to integrate it into your day-to-day teaching or co-learning, however whatever your method is of engaging students.
Wonderful. I mean, this is just so smart and helpful. And I think that a lot of people are going to just go on right after this, because it just provides such a great framework for getting started and making a big impact. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Julian. I mean, it's been so wonderful to reconnect. And I just feel like this program you've created is so smart and helpful and effective, as everything you've ever done has always been. So I'm really, really excited for some of our families to start using it and helping their children live in the world, because that's, I think, what sustainability is really about ultimately.
Thank you. What you've said is really encouraging, and I appreciate it. And I've always thought of you as a leader, an exemplar, and followed your work. And I'm really interested in what you're doing. I love your newsletter and your podcast. Thank you so much, Manisha.
Well, I'm excited to continue to collaborate, and it's very mutual. And just thank you so much again.